I white-knuckled the steering wheel as I guided my SUV down the winding coastal road into Clearwater Cove. The salty breeze whipped through my open window, teasing my chestnut hair into a frenzy. In the rearview mirror, I caught a glimpse of my two children in the back seat. Zoe, my 14-year-old daughter, had her nose buried in her phone, while 10-year-old Max pressed his face against the window, his eyes wide with excitement. "Are we there yet?" Max asked for what felt like the 100th time. I forced a smile, hoping it didn't look as strained as it felt. "Almost, buddy. Just a few more minutes." As we rounded a bend, the quaint seaside town came into view. Colorful storefronts lined the main street, and fishing boats bobbed in the harbor. The knot in my stomach loosened slightly. This was it, our fresh start. The past year had been a whirlwind of heartache and change. My divorce from Richard had been finalized just 3 months ago, leaving me feeling adrift and uncertain. When my aunt offered up her beach house for the summer, I jumped at the chance. A change of scenery was exactly what we all needed. I pulled up to a cheerful yellow cottage nestled among sand dunes and swaying seagrass. "We're here, guys," I announced, trying to infuse my voice with enthusiasm I didn't quite feel. Zoe looked up from her phone with a dramatic eye roll. "Great. 3 whole months trapped in this podunk town." "Thanks, Mom." I bit back a retort. I knew this was hard on Zoe, being uprooted from her friends and routines. "Give it a chance, sweetie. I think we'll all grow to love it here." Max, on the other hand, was already out of the car and racing toward the beach. "Last one in the water's a rotten egg," he called over his shoulder. Despite my fatigue from the long drive, I couldn't help but smile at his excitement. "Slow down, Max. We need to unpack first." The next hour was a flurry of hauling suitcases, choosing bedrooms, and exploring our temporary home. By the time we finished, the sun was starting to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. "Who wants to check out the beach before dinner?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Pass," Zoe muttered, sprawled on the couch with her laptop. "I do." Max bounced on his toes, grinning from ear to ear. I ruffled his hair, grateful for his infectious enthusiasm. "All right, let's go. Zoe, we'll be back in a bit. Try not to burn the house down while we're gone." Her only response was a non-committal grunt. Hand in hand, Max and I made our way down the wooden boardwalk that led to the beach. The sand was still warm beneath our bare feet, and the rhythmic sound of the waves instantly soothed my frayed nerves. "Race you to the water." Max took off running, his laughter carried back to me on the breeze. I jogged after him, my own laughter bubbling up from a place I thought had gone dormant. As the cool water lapped at my ankles, I felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe this summer really would be the fresh start we all needed. The next morning, I woke to the sound of seagulls and the smell of burning. I bolted upright, my heart racing. Then I heard Max's muffled, "Oops," from the kitchen, followed by the unmistakable sound of a fire extinguisher. "Oh, for the love of—" I muttered, scrambling out of bed and racing downstairs. The scene that greeted me in the kitchen was like something out of a sitcom. Max stood in the middle of the room, covered head to toe in flour, a guilty expression on his face. The toaster was smoking ominously, and a fine layer of fire extinguisher foam covered every surface. "I wanted to make you breakfast," Max said in a small voice. I opened my mouth, ready to lecture him about kitchen safety and not using appliances without supervision. But then I saw the tears welling up in his eyes, and my anger melted away. "Oh, honey," I sighed, pulling him into a hug despite the flour. "It's okay. We'll clean this up together." An hour and about 1,000,000 paper towels later, the kitchen was somewhat back to normal. Zoe had even emerged from her room to help, though she'd made it clear it was a one-time thing. "So," I said, surveying my flour-covered children, "who wants to go out for breakfast?" That's how we found ourselves strolling down Clearwater Cove's main street, in search of something edible that wasn't charred beyond recognition. The town was already bustling, a mix of locals and tourists enjoying the perfect summer weather. "Oh, look!" Max exclaimed, pointing to a weathered sign. Can we go on a boat ride? I followed his gaze to an advertisement for fishing charters and sightseeing tours. Before I could respond, a deep voice called out, "You folks looking to hit the high seas?" I turned and my breath caught in my throat. The man approaching us was, well, let's just say if I were writing a romance novel, he'd be on the cover, shirtless and glistening. He looked to be in his late 30s with tousled, dark hair and the kind of blue eyes a girl could drown in. His skin was tanned and weathered from years in the sun, and when he smiled, little crinkles appeared at the corners of his eyes that made my heart do a funny little flip. "I'm Ben," he introduced himself, extending a calloused hand. "Captain of the Sea Whisper. You new in town?" I shook his hand, acutely aware of the warmth of his grip and the way his touch sent little sparks shooting up my arm. "Get it together, Julia." "Julia Matthews," I managed. "And yes, we just got in yesterday. We're here for the summer." Ben's smile widened, and oh boy, was I in trouble. "Well, welcome to Clearwater Cove. If you're interested in a tour of the bay, I'd be happy to show you around." Max was practically vibrating with excitement. "Can we, Mom? Please?" Even Zoe looked mildly interested, which was saying something. I hesitated. It wasn't in the budget I'd carefully planned for our summer, but the hopeful looks on my kids' faces tugged at my heart. I don't know. Ben must have sensed my reluctance. "Tell you what," he said, his voice kind. "First trip's on the house. Consider it a welcome to the neighborhood gift." "Oh, we couldn't possibly." I started to protest, but Ben waved me off. "I insist. It's a slow day anyway, and I'd love the company." He winked at Max, who giggled. "What do you say, first mate? Ready to set sail?" Max nodded so hard I thought his head might fall off. I looked at Zoe, who shrugged but couldn't quite hide her interest. "All right," I relented, earning a cheer from Max. "Thank you, that's very kind of you." Ben's smile was warm enough to rival the sun overhead. "My pleasure. Let's get you folks life jackets and we'll shove off." As we boarded the Sea Whisper, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was embarking on more than just a boat ride. There was something about Ben's easy manner and kind eyes that made my pulse quicken in a way it hadn't in years. "Stop it," I chided myself. "You're here for a fresh start with the kids, not to moon over the first attractive man you meet." But as Ben expertly guided the boat out of the harbor, pointing out landmarks and sharing bits of local history, I found myself relaxing and enjoying the moment. Max peppered Ben with questions about the boat and fishing, while even Zoe seemed to be having a good time, the sea breeze blowing her long hair back from her face. We cruised along the coastline, taking in the stunning views of rocky cliffs and hidden coves. Ben regaled us with tales of local legends and his own fishing adventures, his deep voice carrying easily over the sound of the waves. "And over there," he said, pointing to a secluded stretch of beach, "is where the town holds its summer bonfire nights. Great fun. Music, food, dancing under the stars. You should check it out sometime." I found myself imagining just that. Warm sand between my toes, the glow of a bonfire, and maybe... I shook my head, banishing the thought. "Sounds lovely," I said instead, keeping my voice neutral. As we turned back toward the harbor, Ben let Max take the wheel under his careful supervision. I watched my son's face light up with pride and felt a lump form in my throat. It had been too long since I'd seen him this happy and carefree. When we docked, all three of us were flushed with sun and salt air, grinning despite ourselves. "That was awesome," Max exclaimed, bouncing on his toes. "Can we go again sometime?" Ben chuckled. "Anytime, first mate. You've got a natural talent for sailing." I pulled out my wallet. "Please, let me give you something for your time." But Ben shook his head. "I meant what I said. This one's on the house, but..." He added with a wink that made my stomach do a little flip. "If you wanted to grab a coffee sometime and tell me more about what brings you to our little slice of paradise, I wouldn't say no." I felt my cheeks warm, and not just from the sun. That's very kind of you. We'll see." As we said our goodbyes and headed back up the street, Zoe nudged me. "He was totally flirting with you, Mom." My blush deepened. "Don't be silly. He was just being friendly." Zoe rolled her eyes. "Uh-huh, sure." But as we walked away, I couldn't help glancing back over my shoulder. Ben was still standing on the dock, and when our eyes met, he raised a hand in a small wave. I quickly turned away, my heart doing a little flip in my chest. "What are you getting yourself into? Julia Matthews?" I wondered. But for the first time in months, the thought was tinged with excitement rather than dread. The days began to take on a rhythm, as lazy and predictable as the tides. Mornings were for sleeping in and pancake breakfasts on the porch. Afternoons found us exploring the town or lounging on the beach. Evenings were for board games and stargazing. Slowly but surely, I watched my children begin to unfurl, like flowers reaching for the sun after a long winter. Max's laughter became a constant soundtrack, and even Zoe's sullen silences grew shorter and less frequent. And if I found myself taking more walks along the harbor than strictly necessary, well, that was nobody's business but my own. It was on one such walk, about 2 weeks into our stay, that I quite literally ran into Ben again. I was so lost in thought that I didn't see him until we collided, sending the stack of flyers he was carrying scattering across the boardwalk. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," I exclaimed, dropping to my knees to help gather the papers. Ben's rich laugh sent a shiver down my spine. "No harm done. I should have been paying more attention myself." He crouched down beside me, our hands brushing as we reached for the same flyer. I jerked back as if I'd been shocked, my cheeks flaming. What are these for?" I asked, desperate to change the subject. Just spreading the word about the summer bonfire night," Ben explained, standing and offering me a hand up. "It's this Saturday. You should come. Bring the kids. It's a great Clearwater Cove tradition." I hesitated. "I don't know. We're still getting settled, and Zoe's not big on crowds." Ben's blue eyes twinkled. "Come on, live a little. I promise you won't regret it. Besides," he added with a grin, "who's going to keep me company while I man the grill?" Against my better judgment, I found myself smiling back. "Well, when you put it like that, all right, we'll be there." "Excellent." Ben's grin widened. "I'll save you some prime beachfront real estate." As I walked home, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just crossed some invisible line. But for once, I decided not to overthink it. Maybe it was time to start living again, instead of just existing. Saturday evening found us making our way down to the beach, laden with blankets and snacks. The sun was just beginning to set, painting the sky in vibrant hues of orange and pink. The sound of laughter and music drifted on the breeze, growing louder as we approached the gathering. A large bonfire blazed in the center of the beach, surrounded by clusters of people on blankets and lawn chairs. Strings of lights were strung between poles, giving the whole scene a magical, twinkling quality. "Wow," Max breathed, his eyes wide. "This is so cool." Even Zoe looked impressed, though she tried to hide it. "I guess it's not totally lame," she admitted grudgingly. I scanned the crowd, telling myself I wasn't looking for anyone in particular. But my heart still skipped a beat when I spotted Ben at the grill, expertly flipping burgers and laughing with a group of locals. He looked up just then, catching my eye. His face broke into a wide grin and he waved us over. "You made it," he called as we approached. "I was starting to think you'd stood me up." I rolled my eyes, but I couldn't keep the smile off my face. "We're fashionably late. It's called making an entrance." Ben laughed, the sound warming me from the inside out. "Well, you certainly know how to make an impression. Kids, why don't you grab some food and go introduce yourselves? I think I saw some other youngsters down by the volleyball net." Max didn't need to be told twice, piling his plate high with burgers and chips before racing off toward the other children. Zoe hesitated, glancing at me. "Go on," I encouraged. "Try to have some fun, okay?" With a long-suffering sigh, Zoe grabbed a plate and wandered off, though I noticed she headed in the direction of a group of teenagers lounging near the water's edge. Alone at last, Ben said with an exaggerated wink. Can I interest you in a burger? I'm told I flip a mean patty. I accepted the offered plate, acutely aware of Ben's fingers brushing against mine. Thanks. It smells amazing. We chatted easily as we ate, swapping stories about our lives in Clearwater Cove. I found myself opening up about the divorce, surprised at how natural it felt to confide in him. It's been hard, I admitted, watching Max chase a frisbee with a group of local kids. I worry about them all the time. Am I doing enough? Too much? It's like I'm constantly second-guessing myself. Ben's expression was sympathetic. Parenthood's not for the faint of heart, that's for sure. But from what I've seen, you're doing a hell of a job with those two. I ducked my head, oddly pleased by the compliment. Thanks. They're good kids, really. It's just been an adjustment for all of us. A comfortable silence fell between us, broken only by the crackle of the bonfire and the distant sound of waves lapping at the shore. As the sky darkened, more stars became visible, twinkling like diamonds scattered across black velvet. Beautiful, isn't it? Ben murmured, his voice low. When I turned to look at him, I found his gaze fixed, not on the stars, but on me. My breath caught in my throat. Ben, But before I could finish the thought, Max came barreling up to us, his cheeks flushed with excitement. Mom! Ben! Come on, they're starting the dancing. Indeed, the music had picked up, and people were gathering in the open space near the bonfire. Without waiting for a response, Max grabbed both our hands, tugging us toward the impromptu dance floor. I laughed, allowing myself to be pulled along. All right, I'm coming. The next hour passed in a blur of movement and laughter. I danced with Max, then with some of the local women I'd met. I even managed to coax Zoe into joining for a few songs, her reluctant smile warming my heart. But it was the dances with Ben that left me breathless. His strong hands on my waist, the warmth of his body so close to mine. It awakened something in me that I thought had been lost in the wreckage of my marriage. As a slow song began to play, Ben pulled me close. Is this okay? He murmured, his breath warm against my ear. I nodded, not trusting my voice. We swayed together, and I allowed myself to relax into his embrace. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt safe. Cherished, even. The song ended all too soon, and I reluctantly stepped back. I should probably check on the kids, I said, my voice husky. Ben nodded, understanding in his eyes. Of course. But Julia? Yeah? He hesitated for a moment, then seemed to make up his mind. I'm glad you came tonight. My heart did a little flip. Me too, I admitted softly. As I made my way back to where I'd last seen Zoe, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted between Ben and me. It was exciting and terrifying all at once. I found Zoe sitting with a group of local teens, looking more relaxed than I'd seen her in months. She actually smiled when she saw me approach. Hey, Mom, she said. This is Lily and Jake. They were just telling me about the summer festival next month. I raised an eyebrow, pleasantly surprised. Oh, that sounds fun. Zoe nodded, a hint of excitement in her voice. Yeah, they do a talent show and everything. I was thinking, maybe I could enter with my guitar? My heart swelled. Zoe hadn't touched her guitar since the divorce. That's a great idea, honey. I think you'd be amazing. As we walked home later that night, Max chattering excitedly about his new friends and Zoe humming softly to herself, I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the lingering heat of the bonfire. Maybe, just maybe, coming to Clearwater Cove had been the right decision after all. The next few weeks passed in a sun-drenched blur. We fell into an easy routine, punctuated by new experiences and growing friendships. Max joined a junior sailing program, spending his mornings learning knots and navigation under Ben's watchful eye. Zoe threw herself into practicing for the talent show, the sound of her guitar once again filling our little beach house. And me? Well, I found myself gravitating toward the harbor more often than not, always with a flimsy excuse at the ready. But if I was being honest with myself, it was the promise of Ben's smile that kept drawing me back. We'd grab coffee at the little seaside cafe, or take walks along the beach as the sun set. Sometimes we'd talk for hours about everything and nothing. Other times we'd sit in comfortable silence, watching the waves roll in. It was on one such evening, about a month into our stay, that everything changed. We were sitting on the dock, our feet dangling over the edge. The last streaks of pink were fading from the sky, giving way to a blanket of stars. I'd just finished telling Ben about my latest misadventure in attempting to cook lobster. Let's just say it involved a lot of screaming and a minor grease fire. As our laughter faded, Ben turned to look at me, his expression suddenly serious. Julia, I need to tell you something. My heart rate kicked up a notch. Okay, I said cautiously. He took a deep breath. I know you're only here for the summer, and I know you've got a lot on your plate with the kids and everything, but I can't stop thinking about you. And I was wondering if you felt the same way, we could see where this goes. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. 1,000 thoughts raced through my mind. Fears, doubts, what-ifs. But underneath it all was a simple truth. I felt the same way. Ben, I started, but he held up a hand, his eyes filled with a mix of hope and trepidation. Before you say anything, there's something I need to tell you, he said. I was married once, about 5 years ago. I felt my heart skip a beat, but I nodded for him to continue. Ben took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. Her name was Melissa. We were high school sweethearts, thought we'd be together forever. But after 2 years of marriage, she left me for another man. My chest tightened with empathy. Oh, Ben, I'm so sorry. He shook his head, a rueful smile on his face. For a long time, I was angry, hurt. I threw myself into my work, spent more time on the sea than on land. The ocean, it became my solace, you know? It was the only place I felt at peace. I reached out, placing my hand over his. He turned his palm up, intertwining our fingers. Ever since then, I've been reluctant to let anyone in, he continued. But then you showed up in Clearwater Cove with your kids and your laughter and your terrible lobster cooking skills. His eyes met mine, filled with warmth and something that made my breath catch. And suddenly I found myself wanting more than just the sea for company. My heart was pounding so loudly I was sure he could hear it. Ben, Emotions crashed over me like the waves against the pilings at the pier. This wasn't just a summer crush. This was something real, something that could last beyond the warm days and starry nights of Clearwater Cove. I understood then why he'd been so reserved all this time. He wasn't just a great guy. He was wounded, carrying pain and mistrust from long ago. And yet, he'd been willing to put himself out there, to be vulnerable, to get to know me. It had been difficult for me to meet anyone since the divorce. Taking care of the kids most of the time and working a full-time job didn't leave much room for dating. Not that I'd really wanted to. Sitting there under the stars next to the ocean, now I realized that Ben and I both had to face our fears and learn how to trust again. Thank you, I whispered, my voice thick with emotion. For what? He asked, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. He smiled awkwardly. I looked up at him, seeing the vulnerability in his eyes. Here was a man who had been hurt, who had closed himself off to love. But he was willing to take a chance. On me. On us. Ben, I said softly, stepping closer. I think I'm falling in love with you. His smile was brighter than all the stars in the Clearwater Cove sky. That's good, he murmured, pulling me into his arms. Because I'm pretty sure I'm already there. As his lips met mine, I felt a sense of homecoming, of new beginnings, of a love that could weather any storm. If you enjoy heartwarming, inspirational Southern stories, then pick up a copy of Ernest Dempsey's latest novel, The Final Round. through the link in the description. And be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more stories from Magnolia Crossing when they're uploaded. Thanks for watching.